This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Show on Teachers Talk Radio with Graham Stanley. Today I'll be looking at ESP, English for Specific Purposes, and using humour in English language teaching with my special guest, Geoff Tranter.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Sunday Lunch Show, everyone. As I mentioned, I will be exploring the teaching of ESP, English for Specific Purposes, and the use of humour in ELT, English Language Teaching, with Geoff Tranter, a teacher joining me from Germany. Now, Geoff retired from his university career some time ago, but he still teaches and also does some teacher training. Within the field of language training, testing, and teacher training, he is particularly interested in English for specific purposes. For example, English for technical purposes, for business purposes, aviation English, etc. Implementing the content, approach, and methodology of the Common European Framework for Reference for Languages, CFR, in both language courses and language tests, and using humour as a teaching and learning resource in the English language classroom. And I will be talking to Geoff about ESP and using humour in ELT after the Teachers Talk Radio news.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Schools Week reports that the government has extended a programme that boosts neurodiversity support in mainstream schools, but with less funding than its trial run. The DfE's Partnership for Inclusion of Neurodiversity Inclusion in School, known as PINS, supports neurodiverse students by training teachers to identify and better meet their needs and improves parental engagement. The initial year-long trial was announced by the Conservative government in 2023 as part of a plan for more early intervention in SEND. With a £13 million budget, it has reached around 450,000 children at 1,680 primaries, around 1 in 10 in England. It will now be extended for another year across a further 1,200 schools, where it is expected to benefit over 300,000 more children. But its funding will be £9.5 million, around 1/4 less than the original pilot. The Department for Education said this is because start-up funding in 2023 would not be needed in 2025 to 26. In January, Bridget Phillipson told her first Education Committee meeting that PINS was promising and that government wanted to roll it out further. The BBC covers government promises of more training for people aged 21 and under in England as it presses ahead with plans to scrap funding for postgraduate apprenticeships. From January, only 16 to 21-year-olds will qualify for funding for Level 7 apprenticeships, the highest level and considered the equivalent to a master's degree. This means many higher apprenticeships would have to be completely paid for by employers. The Conservatives have previously described the proposals as a disaster. Overall, the government is promising to create 120,000 more training opportunities for young adults and those who need to retrain. It says an increase in a charge paid by employers recruiting from outside the UK will be used to create 45,000 training places. The shift is to pull funding from the highest level apprenticeships to fund Level 2 programmes. Since an apprenticeship levy for large employers was introduced in 2017, there has been a boom in higher qualifications. However, numbers of young adults starting early apprenticeships at Level 2 has fallen. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson said, "When we invest in skills for young people, we invest in a shared, stronger economic future." She also said the changes would help to address the problem of too many people not in education, employment or training. Too many people sat at home. Full details, union reaction, business reaction and comments from students can be found online. The Guardian covers calls by a charity to scrap guidance for meat 3 times a week in English schools. A report published by the Food Foundation has found that children eat proportionally more processed meat than adults, with more than a third of meat eaten by children coming from processed meats such as bacon, ham and sausages. The study also found that 80% of the most commonly eaten meat dishes in schools are either processed or red meat. The current government guidance says schools should provide a portion of meat or poultry for at least 3 days a week. Food Foundation is calling for the requirement to be relaxed and that increased consumption of fruit, veg and legumes should be encouraged. Rebecca Toby of Food Foundation said, "It's worrying that children are eating so much processed meat and that relaxing the rules would let caterers offer more beans, pulses and whole grains as well as vegetables, improving health and cutting costs." A government spokesperson said, "Through our plan for change, this government is determined to give every child the best start in life." Further details of this story can be found on the newspaper's website. The BBC reports on its US and Canada feed that students around the world are anxious and in limbo as the Trump administration makes plans to temporarily halt US student visa appointments. An official memo seen by CBS News ordered a temporary pause in appointments as the State Department prepares to increase social media vetting of applicants. The changes have brought widespread uncertainty, with visa appointments at US embassies now unavailable, and delays that could leave scholarships up in the air. Some students told the BBC that they were even wishing they had applied to schools outside the US. More than 1.1 million international students from over 210 countries were enrolled in US colleges in the 2023-24 school year. Full details, including reaction from students in China, India, Wales and England, can be found on the BBC News website. Finally, Sizewell C nuclear power plant has announced plans to build and open a new post-16 college, according to BBC Suffolk. Working in partnership with Suffolk New College, the new institution would be opened in September 2027. It plans to offer comprehensive multi-site education and training and also to support up to 540 local apprenticeships. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm very happy to say that I'm here with Geoff Tranter. And Geoff, could you start by telling everyone who you are and where you are?
The name you have just mentioned, I am now retired, but I live in Germany. I've been based in Dortmund, West Germany, which for those people who don't know Germany is fairly near to Cologne and Düsseldorf. And I've been here for over 50 years. I started teaching more than 50 years ago in Britain. I was a lecturer at what was at that time Leeds Polytechnic. I saw an advertisement in the newspaper that the College of Adult Education in Dortmund, West Germany, was looking for a head of department. And Leeds and Dortmund are twin cities, which is another reason for coming. And for about 30 years, I was then head of the language department at the Adults and Further Education College in Dortmund.
Fantastic.
The last 15 years, I've been retired, but still active.
So how do you like being retired, Geoff, after so many years teaching?
Well, I haven't stopped teaching. In fact, I still teach. I still teach at the Technical University here in Dortmund. I teach ESP once a week. Tuesday is my ESP day at the university with students, engineering students of ESP. And another project I have started, which involves the twinning aspects more than the university aspects, because Leeds and Dortmund are twin cities, and I come from Leeds. And to further the contacts between Leeds and Dortmund, I started doing online German courses for the citizens of Leeds.
Oh, wonderful.
And that is taking up quite a lot of my time at the moment, but it's an attempt to promote language learning and promote the partnership between the two cities at the same time, which I've developed my own materials called Welcome to Germany, Welcome to Dortmund, as a Willkommen in Dortmund in German. And it's a 12-lesson course based on PowerPoint. And on each page of the PowerPoint slides, there are slides showing Dortmund, the best and the worst of Dortmund. That's the second teaching project. So over these years, I haven't stopped teaching. And to come back to your question, what was it like being retired? It's great because I can do what I want.
Yes.
Retirement is absolutely marvelous, providing you avoid all the holes that many people fall into when they leave their professional life.
Yes, of course. So that sounds fantastic that you've become an ambassador for Leeds and Dortmund, an ambassador for Dortmund and Leeds. That's wonderful.
I'm also chair of the Anglo-German Society here in Dortmund, so that's part of my brief. We do evenings on various aspects of British life. I spent the last 3 or 4 years trying to explain how Brexit happened and what the consequences of Brexit are, and what is happening in Britain politically. Next month, we're doing a session on Nigel and Co. But we don't want to talk about politics now.
Let's not go there. Let's not go there, Geoff.
It is important, especially on Brexit, to bring the two countries and the two twin cities together, because other political decisions like the forms you now have to fill in order to get into Britain are creating barriers for connections between the two countries.
Of course, of course. I want to explore this idea of ESP, English for Special Purposes, or specific purposes rather. Is that an area of teaching that you were drawn to early on in your career?
Yes. The focus became more important at university because university students, they're not the mandatory courses, they're optional courses that students can take, students who are studying in various faculties. But nowadays they do need to be able to have a qualification that gives evidence that they're being able to cope at the workplace in their second language, English. And it's fascinating because I refuse to use any materials available on the market. And I have worked out a system whereby I can teach now more or less any ESP topic apart from law and medicine. But I don't understand the content. But I can develop a method which allows me to teach virtually any student from any faculty in the skills they require for their particular speciality.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
In fact, I do webinars on that topic. There's one coming up. Do you know the ICC webinars?
I don't. I'll have to look them up.
On the ICC page, beginning the first half of July. I think it's the 10th of July. I'm doing a webinar on book or no book.
Okay.
I come down heavily on no book for ESP, ESP and post.
I can imagine.
Yes.
What I'd like to know is, I'm sure you've seen changes when it comes to ESP over the years, with different subjects becoming more important in your context. Is that the case? And how have the changes been? And what now are students mainly interested in when it comes to English for specific purposes?
They come with the wrong idea, which is they want to learn vocabulary. And I consider all ESP courses to be firstly skill-based courses.
Mm-hmm.
So I concentrate on developing the skills, and very often it's the receptive skills that need more training than the active skills, so speaking and writing. And the second thing is that I have discovered late in life, in the last 5 or 10 years at the university, that teaching the language element in ESP courses is not enough. You have to teach them, and teach in inverted commas, teach them things that they don't know in their topic, in their own subject.
Right. Is that from a motivation point of view?
In order to reach out to them, because basically they're not so much interested in the language, they're interested in the qualification they get at the end of the course. And so I need to motivate them, for example, to read. Reading is work, listening is work. I need to motivate them. And just as an example, how I can get them to read and write, I start always saying, what do you know about? And recently, I had a very interesting experience. Course of engineers, towards the end of the course, at C1 level, engineers from various engineering faculties. And I asked them, what do you know about geoengineering? Not one of them knew. Not one of them. And they made guesses, and all the guesses were wrong. I said, well, in that case, listen to this video. And the intensity with which they listened to the video was amazing. And then I said, well, what have you learned? What have you learned in English about geoengineering? And then they reported. First of all, they talked to each other about what they'd heard, and then they told me what was new for them. And then I said, well, here's an article from The Guardian about geoengineering. What's new in there? And in this way, I'm teaching them, even though I know very little about geoengineering myself, I provide them with the resources so that they can find out what they need to, what they want to, not much, in this case, not need to, what they want to find out about geoengineering. And they're developing their listening skills, they're developing their reading skills, and I was working with a book where I had to do grammar exercises in an ESP course. I think it's, I've wasted lots of students' time.
Right. Yeah, actually, it reminds me, I used to teach English for specific purposes when I worked at a university in Barcelona, and there were students of tourism, and I had the freedom to kind of teach an aspect of English so long as it referred to tourism. It was kind of up to me. So I chose to teach theme tourism, and I chose different kind of themes, case studies. So I did, for example, we looked at the Beatles and Liverpool, and how the Beatles is used in Liverpool to attract tourists, and how it's kind of like overdone in a lot of ways. And then I also looked at history with a special I chose Robin Hood, so the legend of Robin Hood, and there was that came out of an article that I saw, that there were different areas in the UK that were trying to claim Robin Hood. So Yorkshire was one of them, and the idea of how it's so important in the UK to attract visitors. If you can kind of establish a local legend and places related to that legend, then you will actually increase the number of visitors to that place. And there were areas, because I'm from the UK, they were easy for me to kind of research and to know about. And it was the same kind of thing I think you're talking about, the idea of giving the students something they didn't know about related to what they were studying, that they could then, so the idea of historical figures they could relate to, because to a certain extent, the same thing was happening in Barcelona. The history was being used to attract tourists and stuff. So I think it's a great idea, actually.
Yeah. A similar example with my social science students, who are very, very motivated in their topic. I mean, there's no point in studying social sciences if you're not interested in society and the inequalities and the problems and the issues in life today. But we had the topic of school recently, and I got onto the co-educational or single sex, and they were so involved. They almost forgot they were speaking English, because they were telling me about the reasons why, their experience about the experience of the from their own school, and I just threw in the topic and off they went. And it is the same in the speaking skill, as I was talking about a few moments ago, with the engineers wanting to read and wanting to listen. So if as I believe, ESP is not so much knowledge transfer, but skill promotion, training skills, then that is the way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. That's fascinating. Geoff, I wanted to ask you about the use of humour as well in language teaching. This is how we first met, is that I went to a session you gave in Poland at a conference many years ago. And I was fascinated by it, and I signed up for your newsletter. And I've always thought that you were doing something then that was really interesting, that not a lot of people were kind of exploring, or a lot more teachers should have been exploring. So I'd love to hear about how you kind of developed that aspect of or that interest, and how it first occurred to you, and then what's happened subsequently.
Well, I've always had a highly developed sense of humor, and I've always had a high level of sensitivity towards the ambiguity of language. And when I talk about humor, I'm not talking about jokes, because jokes are based normally on cruelty. But a lot of jokes are based on cruelty, by man to man and woman to woman. I'm talking about the use of humor to make to use that is telling a story, which is a different skill. And I was brought up with the Goon Show. I was brought up with Hancock's Half Hour. I was brought up with Navy Lark, all of which, unlike British humour today, were based very much on playing with words. And the idea behind my use of humour in the classroom is to make people become more aware of words, of the meaning of words, of the use of words, and extending their lexical competence. And there are two ways of doing this. The first way is to put them into situations where they can see that a word has more than one meaning, which is not often the case with people learning English as a foreign language. Sometimes both meanings are not clear to the student, just the one meaning. And the other way is to what I call the comedy of errors, which is showing people what humorous situations can happen or can occur from using language in the wrong way. Now, the first one, playing with words, is something that I do in my testing times, which you mentioned a few moments ago, and I've been doing that now for about 25 or 30 years, at least one every year. But I take something from outside the classroom and transfer it to the classroom and show what nonsense the original is by by playing with words. I'm just trying to think of examples. There's a lot of these concerned with Brexit.
The latest one that you sent
Oh,
was really
American English. Yeah. Make American English great again. Yeah.
exactly. I thought that was really good.
Yeah. And for those people who haven't seen it, and if you show my contact data, and people are very welcome to approach me and receive a copy.
Are you okay with me reading out part of that on the show?
No, yes, no problem at all. It's not copyrighted. It's just me come to terms with frustration by means of humour, because I find humour is a lovely safety valve for frustration. But the idea behind it was that what you just mentioned, the Testing Times edition, was done about 3 or 4 weeks ago. But the idea was that Trump didn't take over Greenland and annex Greenland and annex Canada, but he annexed the British Council and Alta in order to make American English again and thwart British English becoming global English. What didn't come in that particular edition was, that came to me too late, is that if Trump took over the British Council, it might even become the Brutish Council. Which is a way of, which is an example of how we can play with words to transfer content from one situation to another situation. So horizontal humor, horizontal lateral thinking.
Yes, of course.
But these are available.
How did you come up with this idea of writing that newsletter, that Testing Times?
That was a long time ago. I think the first one I did was back in the 80s. Again, it was a frustration. I remember, because most of them have come from frustrations, whether the point of frustration is Boris Johnson, or whether it is FIFA, or whether it is any elitist organization. Trying to bring them down to size by showing them how ridiculous they are. For example, I have one on Boris Johnson, which was Alice in Blunderland during his regime. And I did, another one was on Liz Truss. Liz Truss's LinkedIn account after 49 days. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, things like... this is another one of the things that I must admit to hating, even though we have linked up now by LinkedIn. I hate LinkedIn because of the I am thrilled, I am humbled, I'm absolutely... they shouldn't put I am humbled, it should be I'm humiliated. But the way people describe and self-display and self-exhibit, it has nothing to do with my tradition of language teaching, etc. But that's just one of my things. But the Liz Truss LinkedIn account was a fictitious list of Liz Truss's contributions to LinkedIn in the 50 days that she was in charge of the government.
Right, wonderful. And did you always have in mind students of English as the audience for that, or teachers and students?
Anybody with the knowledge and reading skills to be able to understand. So I have a mailing list of about 250, 300 people, and I think they pass it on to others as well.
Great, yeah, I'm sure. What about in your actual teaching? Did the humour filter through into that? Have you always used humour in your teaching?
Yeah, spontaneously. I never go in to a normal classroom intending to use one particular pun. They occur to me in the course of the lesson, and I think that is one of the keys to a successful use of humour, because planned humour often fails, and it's a spontaneity that I think produces the successful response on the part of the students.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
And what would you say to other teachers who may be listening and are thinking, I'd like to use humour more in my classes? How would they go about doing that?
Well, I could say buy my book, but if you don't enjoy the humour yourself, then it will not be successful.
Right.
It has to be genuine. It has to be spontaneous. It has to come from you. I, for example, would never go into the lesson with a guitar because my voice is terrible and it wouldn't work. So, but other teachers are really successful in using music and singing as a method of teaching English. So humor has to be sincere, has to be real, has to be spontaneous. And when I teach humor in teacher training courses, I don't really teach so much the actual examples for them to use in the things that you can then adopt yourself and use to create your own humor spontaneously in the classroom and in real life, because it works just as well in real life and in the classroom.
Yeah, of course. And you've given workshops on the use of humour in language teaching, haven't you?
Yes. Over the years, many times. For ICC, I have done something. If you go onto the ICC homepage and go through the archive of webinars over the last 4 to 5 years, you'll find a couple there. For IATEFL Poland, I have done webinars. They will also be available on the webpage of IATEFL Poland. One of the most famous, some of them have become actually quite well known. I think that the most famous one, and I think that's the one that you saw 15 years ago, I think it was in Warsaw, which is alcohol linguistics, to show how the alcohol can help you to become fluent, with lots of plays on words, with all a load of expressions and vocabulary items dealing with alcohol.
That's right. I remember now.
And if people Google, go onto YouTube and look for alcohol linguistics, it was recorded at the IATEFL conference in, I think it was in Manchester or Birmingham, but it's still available on YouTube, alcohol linguistics. And then you can see 400 people in the auditorium almost falling on the ground. And with Jeremy Harmer on the stage doing his best to keep a straight face.
Fabulous.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
How do you approach that developing that type of session? Is it something, does it come from an idea that you have about a particular theme or topic, like alcohol and linguistics, bringing them together? Or
take the serious topic, move it left or right into a different context, and then show how ridiculous it is out of context. Another one I've done is to show when my brother got married, I was the best man and had to give a talk, and I tried to show how marriage has a lot of similarities with English grammar.
Go on then. You need to tell us more about that one.
Well,
what can you remember about that one?
Well, just as in real life, in real married life, you have to look out for the relatives. You have to. I'm trying to think of the ones which are less naughty. But things like definite articles, indefinite articles play a role, and it's a long time since I've looked at that. What else was that? Personal pronouns.
I guess false friends would be an obvious one as well, wouldn't it?
Would be, yeah. And the fact that you're taking things out of context, putting them in a different context where they don't normally belong, has an amazing effect on people.
Of course, yeah. Right. Are there any
accusatives? Is another one that comes up into marriage. Yeah.
Yes, I can imagine.
My strategy for dealing with testing times, which I think is behind your question, my strategy is to think of a topic. Let's take Trump. Look what has happened over the last 6 months. Look for words that have a meaning both in terms of Trump and his new regime, and language teaching on the other hand, and see where we can find enough ambiguities and enough double entendre in order to create a level of humor that people appreciate.
Right, of course.
And it works, actually. I do it in German as well.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. Some people think that the Germans have no sense of humor, which is not true. They just have a different sense of humor. And there are many remarks about the so-called German sense of humor. For example, when I give a talk on the German sense of humor, that people would say, well, that must be the shortest event that ever took place. But what is happening is that the German humor is going nearer and nearer to this type of British humor that we've been talking about. Germans are now learning to play with German, which they didn't do 50 years ago. They have now started to play with their own language, and there are many shows now, especially in the political humor scene, which do play with humor, play with words in the same way that I apply the strategy in testing times and similar things. So
where did that idea come from, do you think, the idea of the Germans having a poor sense of humour? Because this stereotype has persisted, hasn't it?
It's a good question. How can you assess another nation's sense of humour if you're not at a fairly high proficiency level in the language? Mm-hmm. Because the lower the proficiency level, I think the more superficial your understanding is going to be, and this superficiality is one reason for that kind of prejudice, and possibly because until 80s and 90s, humor didn't really cross borders. It's quite interesting because one of my main one of the programs I really enjoyed 50 years ago was, of course, Monty Python. And Monty Python is very difficult to hasn't been brought up in a British background. The German television actually did try to introduce Monty Python to the German public, not one of the main channels, but one on one of the regional channels, and it went down like a lead balloon. On the other hand, something like Mr. Bean or Fawlty Towers does go down in Germany, because done well in Germany, because it is also visual. You have the English word. It's also very physical.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's something to laugh at, even if you can't understand the words. There's something to laugh at about the stupidity that's taking place on the stage.
So what about the famous episode, The Germans in Fawlty Towers, that has recently become very controversial? How did or do Germans react to that?
I think they just say, okay. I mean, a few years ago, sensitivity level was higher, but I think now it can be. They realize what the purpose of the program is, and don't take it personally.
Yeah.
But I don't particularly like that element. I mean, there are better shows within the Fawlty Towers series.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you started talking about this, Geoff, earlier, this idea of humour changing, the idea of humour crossing borders and stuff like that. You're in a very interesting position to see how that has happened within Germany. You started talking a little bit about how German humour is starting to focus more upon the language, etc. Do you think there is more has there been a kind of nearing of English and German humour, or UK and German humour over the years, or is it still very different or very...
Well, I said a few moments ago, German humour has changed. I think British humour has changed, and not for the better. Because the obsession with stand-up comedy in Britain, I think, has led to a deterioration in the quality of humour. Right. I object to the use of taboo words in order to create a humorous effect. And I think that has nothing to do with the type of humor I mentioned a few moments ago with Hancock's Off Hour. And one part of Germany is actually the geographical center of the European Union. It's in Bavaria, north of Bavaria. They now have a humor walk.
A humour walk?
Yes, and it's about 6 or 7 kilometers long, and there are 27 stations along this walk. Each station is one of the 27 countries in the European Union, and at each station there is a table or a tableau showing giving a description of the type of humour that is found in that particular country, and an example. And it's only you can't find it on the internet unless you Google the German word, which is Narrenwanderweg, and Narren, and then Wander, as it Wander, and then Pfad, Pfad, and you'll come to a blog which the local people have established, and it takes you through the 27 stations of humour. And that, I think, is something that I only found out about this recently. I think it's a fantastic idea, because if you can understand people's humour, you can probably start to understand the people a little more than you would have if you haven't understood their sense of humour. So people listening might like to go onto that website and find out all about the 27 senses of humour within the EU. It's a pity the British aren't in there, and then we would have a 28, which is the ultimate sense of humour.
So, what on those 27 stages? Which one of them surprised you the most, or was remarkable, or maybe a difficult question to answer, perhaps were there any? Was there a lot of difference between the 27 types of humour?
There's still one or two. I won't mention any names, but there are still one or two that resort to the Irish type joke. The Englishman, Irishman, Scotsman, and because the French have their Belgians and the German have their East Frisians and the Czechs have their Slovakians, and etc. 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 In some areas they are still quite prevalent, which I think again is not something that would be desirable, or is desirable within the context of the European Union.
Yeah, of course. And you also mentioned that you don't like the kind of obsession with stand-up that humour in the UK has started to kind of move towards. It's become a lot popular.
20, 30 years almost.
Yeah.
But at the moment, even BBC Radio 4 humour programmes, which were my main source of humour, have turned into into this category of. I still listen regularly to the news quiz, for example, but the news quiz has become a vehicle for people trying out their stand-up humour type of approach, even though they are on a panel of 4. And
right.
I think that's a shame because you can do far more with newspapers and articles from newspapers than simply resort to taboo language and taboo areas.
Yeah. Do you think this move towards more kind of stand-up type humour is a move away from kind of collectively written humour towards more spontaneous, individualistic humour, do you think?
I'm not quite sure. That's a difficult one. I think stand-up comedians or stand-up comedy for me goes back to the schoolboy type of puerile humour, which kids at school, at the grammar school I went to, used to say behind. That kind of humour, I think, is no longer. There's no longer any place for that in society today. People definitely want to be amused. People need humour. Humour is a good defence. And with all the things that are happening in the world today, humour does at least distract. And if you have a good humour programme on television or on radio for 30 minutes, then it does relax you because it takes your mind off other things. And so defence, it's good self-defence. People hide behind humour in terms of being liked by their peers, but also in terms of being able to put up a self-defense against what is happening in the world. I mean, to a certain extent, I think my Trump, my Boris Johnson, my Brexit were in the same direction. If you can't beat them, at least hit them. Put up the defences so that you can show that you are not taking them as seriously as they would like to have been taken.
Yeah. And has stand-up become a thing in Germany?
There are attempts, but it is by no means as popular as it has become in Britain. And the kind of stand-up where you have a session for 1 hour and you have 6 or 7 comedians, one after the other, that has not yet reached Germany. There are things, individual comedians will get up on the stage, but when they do, I think where the German humour has taken over is in political humour, satire. German satire has reached a high level, linguistic level, and a high intellectual level, because it doesn't need the taboo words and it doesn't need the obscenities in order to be funny. And there are now some really good German television programs that are based on satire, satire of their own country, satire of Europe, satire of any political events in the world today. And they are a good, trying to think of the English word, a good way of getting rid of frustrations in the audience, and you can see the audience respond in a positive way to people who are in line with their train of thought regarding political movements and the populist world we're living in.
What about other things, Geoff? What you mentioned before we started recording, when we were talking, that your interests lie elsewhere as well now, apart from the ESP, which we've already talked about, and Is there anything else we haven't talked about where you kind of particularly focus?
Anglo-German aspects and Anglo-German connections, twinnings between countries. I am the chair of the Anglo-German Society in Dortmund, and one of my aims, important aims, is to bring the people of Britain and Germany together, but in particular the two twin cities, Leeds, where I was born, and Dortmund, where I live now, together. And 20, 30 years ago, these twinning arrangements were really active, very, very positive. Two things happened since then. First was Brexit, and the second one was the pandemic. And as a result of these, the links have become more tenuous. And so one of the things I try to do is to bring people together as much as possible. During the pandemic, we used to have Anglo-German evenings purely on Zoom. So the Anglo-German Society in Leeds and the Anglo-German Society in Dortmund came together. We spoke English or German, whatever people wished to communicate in. And we still, with Zoom is ideal for twinning, because you can't afford, even without the restrictions on travel, you can't afford to travel one country to the other every 2 or 3 weeks. And so Zoom is a boon to people who are interested in another country. And so we have political evenings on politics in German, or politics Germany, politics in Britain, during the election last year in Britain, the UK election. For the election, we had a joint Anglo-German meeting to show the people here in Germany what it was all about, what the issues were in the election. And then a week after the election, we had a second meeting called "And the Winner Is," when people were able from England were able to explain to the German audience what it was all about, how they feel about the result, etc., etc. And then we had a great talk about the voting system in Britain, how it is that you can get 2/3 of the vote, 2/3 of the seats with only 1/3 of the votes in an election, which is something unthinkable for Germans. And I in the same way, I bring people together. We have a lot of senior citizens who have joint afternoons via the television. Senior citizens from Dortmund, senior citizens from Britain, who talk about what life is like for senior citizens in Leeds, what life is like for senior citizens in Germany. And my latest project, and that's probably what we were talking about before the program started, is that I set up an English course, a German course for people from the Twin City. And it's an online course, 12 evenings, called Willkommen in Dortmund, Welcome to Dortmund. And it's based on a PowerPoint, and every PowerPoint presentation, every slide, is a picture of Dortmund, together with the language we are going through on that particular evening. And there were 2 levels, beginner's level and a refresher level. And the amazing thing was, I published this through the International Relations Department of the City Council in Leeds. And within 2 days, we had 250 people who wanted to take part.
Wow, it's amazing.
And we only were able to take 2 times 12 because I didn't want more than 12 people in one course. So it just shows what potential there is for what interest there is in twinning arrangements and in the other language. And another reason is, of course, German is hardly ever found on school curricula in Britain nowadays. And the whole of Leeds, there are only, which is not the smallest city in Britain, there are only 5 schools that offer German, and only 2 that take German all the way to A level. And so that is also, and there is no local authority-based German course in the whole of Leeds. All you can do is private. So we're going to, in view of the success, the course finishes next week, but in view of the success, I'm now arranging with a school here in Dortmund to offer more courses online for citizens of Leeds, based on the topics and the situations and the issues that confront people when they want to visit their twin city. So it is, as I said, I don't like books anyhow, but there's nothing on the market for this particular purpose. It's restricted solely to topics and situations you will be confronted with, or we will probably be confronted with when you visit your twin city in Germany. And I put in a submission for a grant for the course, and that was approved by the ministry in Düsseldorf. And now we've got to select people, and we've now just so that they can use the German and see all the things in real life that they have seen on their language program.
That's fabulous. And the people who go to the course, is there, what in general, if you can make any generalization about their motivation, what is their motivation for doing the course? Is it a curiosity thing? Is it because of the twinning, or is it because they have visited Germany and would like to know a little bit more? What is it?
It varies, but basically people are interested in Germany. And there is a certain degree of affinity between the two countries, regardless of the fact that we went to war together twice in the last century. But there is an interest. People do feel, I think, closer to German than many other European countries, put it that way. So that is the first motivation. The second motivation is that people often come here on holiday. The River Rhine, I think, is one of the main areas that most British people would like to see, and Berlin, of course. Most people want to go and see Berlin. But then there are personal reasons. One man was born in Berlin. His father was a soldier, and he left when he was 8, so he hasn't hardly any memory. And it's a real mixture, but and age group from about 30 all the way up to 80. I think their oldest is 84. And they come regularly, they do their homework, and the atmosphere, because it is restricted to these situations, these topics, and because communication is the main aim, and because grammar and correct pronunciation are just not important, they have developed a high level of confidence, and they are prepared to talk. Which, in a way, and perhaps I know the thought just came to me. Perhaps that's because they are not in a room with 12 people; they are in a room by themselves, and perhaps that makes it easier to open your mouth in front of in public. But in October. And the people I've been teaching will welcome them and take them round Leeds. So this is opening lots of doors to developing on all levels contacts between people of the countries. Because one of the things that has gone wrong over the years is that the twinning participation has been at a high level, council level, Lord Mayor level, and very, very. And at schools, perhaps the schools were organised. But apart from that, on the individual level, senior citizens, the man in the street and the woman in the street, they have never really had a chance to get involved in training activities. And that is one of my main aims with all these various projects.
Wow, this is so great to hear. It's particularly in a time where it does feel like there are fewer people learning languages or taking an interest in learning or trying to speak languages, because there is this, I do get this sensation that a lot of people feel like automatic translation and devices are starting to be able to assist people with other languages. So I'm kind of interested to hear that the people in the course or 30 or above. What do you think? There is a lack of interest for the younger generation in learning languages these days. Is that something you've detected?
I'm not quite sure. What I do detect is the increasing trend towards what I would call short-termism. You can do a 6-week course in IT. You can do a 6-week course in cooking. You can do a 6-week course, a crash course in things like this. But to learn a language, it takes time. And anything that goes beyond 3 or 4 months, I think, is something that people nowadays are unlikely to want to start. When I first came to Dortmund 50 years ago, and the first day I arrived was at the College of Adult Education, was the enrollments day for languages. And there was a queue of 150 people outside the building waiting to get in to book a course on English. That is unthinkable nowadays. And they used to come for semester after semester, year for year, and they'd take about 8 or 9 courses in a row. People don't do that nowadays. They want to, it's what I mean with short-termism. They want everything on their plate as quickly as possible, with minimum effort and minimum time investment. And that doesn't work with language. So even my 12 weeks or twinning German is short-termism. I just hope that it will create a spark that they will want to continue to reach a level where they can communicate, not just within these very, very restricted areas, but in more general areas.
Yes, I think you're right. There's a kind of decrease in attention span. There's a demand for trying to do more with less time that is often is impossible, but it's led to a lot of, for example, a lot of commercial propositions about language learning that overpromise the idea of being able to speak a language in a very short period of time, which you and I both know is impossible.
This TikTok approach, yeah.
That's a good name for it. TikTok languages.
Yeah. I mean, if it were possible, I'd be the first to promote it, but it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no, of course not. So listen, Geoff, we've been speaking for about an hour, so I'm going to bring things to an end. I've really enjoyed speaking to you and reconnecting after so long ago that we actually met in person, and I was fortunate to see your wonderful presentation back in Poland. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing generously your knowledge and experience. It's been a pleasure.
And I hope we meet up again sometime at some conference.
I hope so.
Yeah. And if you wish, on the 10th of July, the ICC webinar on book, no book.
Fantastic. I will try and attend that one, definitely.
Okay, I've sold my first customer, right?
Okay, Geoff, take care.
Thanks a lot. I've enjoyed it as well, and we'll keep in touch. Okay, bye.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
And welcome back, everyone. I've been a subscriber to Geoff's humorous newsletter, Testing Times, for a long time now. And Geoff kindly, as you heard, agreed to let me read a part of the latest one out today. So here are some excerpts. US President to annex British Council and Goethe Institute to make American English great again. For worried British and European linguists, the question now is what consequences such a trumped-up executive order might have, especially in view of the extremely discriminatory attitude towards anything and anybody that is considered to be non-métier, make American English great again. For example, the grammar and vocabulary should not only be right, it has to be extremely right. According to insiders at the Council of Europe, as yet unconfirmed rumours should suggest that the following terrific and bootiful mega English language amendments may soon well apply unconditionally. American English will with immediate effect be known as the President's English. The alternative name King's English is still under consideration. The concept of EFL will be replaced by EAL, English as an American language, which the presidential degree has now been declared to be the only official language in the US. The irregular past tense form of the verb to wake will be banned. All transitive verbs will be eradicated from the American English lexicon. To ensure the financial security of the mega movement, all male and female forms of the language will be known as masculine and non-masculine. To protect American English from corruption by alien English dialects, a new version of the TESOL test will be introduced to ensure that only American English is used. TESOL here stands for Test to Eliminate Speakers of Other Languages. Such tests will be known as displacement test. A new agency with the name of DOGE, the Department of Grammatical Efficiency, will be set up to enforce the new language competence level A0.5 to be known as presidential competence. This will be based on a redundancy corpus generated from a compendium of the president's campaign speeches. Words or phrases containing European references will be replaced by American words. For example, French fries will become Florida fries, German measles will be known as Georgia measles, Dutch courage will be replaced by Don's courage, and Turkish delight will be known as Trump delight. All real estate occupied at present by the British Council or ALTE member organisations will be annexed and repurposed for leisure activities. For example, British English language courses will be replaced by golf courses. To ensure freedom of speech for all truly American citizens, any grammar rule based on traditional British English usage will be summarily escorted out of the White House. To stop the increasing liberal use of language, all tenses that are present, known as progressive forms, for example, past progressive, will be disqualified, and in keeping with the intellectual background of the governing political class, only simple forms will be used. In keeping with the aims of MEGA, the Biden regime will always be referred to in the imperfect past tense, and all statements concerning the coming 4, if we're lucky 8 or more, Trump protégés will exclusively use the future perfect continuous, with at least 2 superlatives to be included in any sentence. No language that has more than 2 genders will be allowed to cross the American border except for Russian. And there you are. Very funny, Geoff. Well done. So I'm going to cut it a little bit short today, shorter than usual, that is. So that is the end of the Sunday Lunch Show. Many thanks to my special guest, Geoff Tranter, and to all of you who join me live or who are listening back to the recording. This is going to be my last show for a couple of months, as I have so much going on in my life, and I will be back in August. Until then, remember there are lots of other shows on Teachers Talk Radio to listen to during the week, and you can also listen to the many, many recordings, conversations made by all sorts of interesting people from all over the world about lots of different subjects by going to ttr.org and searching on whatever may interest you. That's all, folks. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.